One of my favourite trees to visit in this park is this weeping willow. It's magnificent to look at from the outside, but almost as equally spectacular from the inside as well. And that's what I'm here to capture right now, the magnificence of this tree, albeit from a slightly quirky angle. Right underneath here, I'm going to do something that maybe you don't see every day. I'm not going to lean backwards and try and crane up and take a picture up there like that. I'm just going to put my phone out nice and flat like this. And the reason I think that makes sense is that the front-facing cameras on phones are actually, these days, really good quality. And there's a couple of qualities about them that I like. First of all, nice and wide angle lens. They fit lots of stuff in. And that means I can fit a lot of this tree in. But the other thing is, because of that, they've also got quite an extensive depth of field as well. So I can get loads of tree in focus, including some of these foreground branches as well, because compositionally, I want to try and get a bit of foreground as well as all of the background. So just holding the phone out nice and flat, and because the lens is so wide here, I need to be careful, even this far away, still getting a bit of my head in. We don't want that. So I'm kind of having to hold it at arm's length, but I've still got good visibility of what's on the screen. And the other thing, of course, is make sure that you're happy with the composition. I could go symmetrical and have the phone going, you know, the trunk going straight up, but I feel having it at an angle across the frame is probably what I want to do, as well as having some bits of foreground interest in as well. Still need to tap to focus. A couple of things just to be aware of. First of all is the orientation of the phone. Now, of course, we know what we're expecting here, this vertical shot and the camera facing upwards, but sometimes the phone can get a little bit confused and it's not always evident. And what I mean is, just with a little tilt to the side, you can see the furniture, the writing around the outside of the screen has suddenly gone to this horizontal mode, which I don't actually want. I want this to be a vertical shot. So unless you're keeping an eye on that, then it might have just switched. So what you need to do is just to tilt it ever so slightly vertical again, and you see how the writing changed. And then the other thing, not necessarily a right or a wrong here, but just something we're going to have a play with, is HDR. Because the tree is very backlit, I'm shooting up into the sky after all, there's only a certain amount of dynamic range, difference between light and dark, that the camera is able to capture with a single exposure. At the moment, this image looks actually fairly monochromatic. And I quite like that. I like this contrasty shot. Maybe I'll try again in a moment. I'll turn on the HDR. But first of all, let's just get a bit of this. There we go. Again, just check focus. Make sure you aren't appearing in the bottom of the shot, because we don't want that. There we go. Lovely. Now I'm going to turn on the HDR. Right. And it may or may not make a difference here, but let's see. Just make sure that my phone is in its vertical mode. There we are. And now the wind's blowing a bit. That's introducing a bit of movement. That might be quite interesting, actually. There we go. Right, we've got a few options there, both with and without HDR. Let's see which ones came out the best. My intent with these images was not that they become selfies, yet my forehead and hair appears to have made it into the bottom of this frame, which is a bit of a shame, because otherwise I think this is rather lovely. We've got this tree, the trunk spidering its way across. We've got the fall of the leaves. I think this is potentially a good shot, just without my head in it. With this shot, I did not have the HDR mode enabled on the phone's camera, and I think it kind of tells in a way. The tree becomes a mass of black, and the sky becomes a mass of light, and from an abstract point of view, I think that's kind of interesting, but there's so much black on there, I just wish there were a little bit more detail. Compositionally, I think it's fine, but I just want a little bit more nuance, I think, from this shot. By turning on the HDR mode on the phone's camera, I do start to get that more detail. Just have a look towards the middle of the trunk here. I can see the expressive lines of the bark as it makes its way up the tree, and that just adds a little bit more interest for me. Compositionally, it's nice. I've got some highlights, the sun peeking through the clouds, peeking through the canopy there. I think this is probably the most successful of the shots I've taken underneath this weeping willow.